Friends, let us talk about the 18th lecture in module 3, where we will briefly summarize all the possible points what we so far studied on risk management. So, if you recollect back about the risk assessment in total, we started defining risk, we also defined what is the risk acceptability, we also showed how risk can be easily said in financial terms, what we call financing risk, how risk assessment can be used in identifying the priority of failure using risk priority number in FMECA studies, and ultimately we said that one is interested in identifying not the risk, prior to that let us identify the hazards present in the system. So, hazard studies. So, from the hazard study one can easily find out the failure scenarios, from the failure scenario one can easily identify what are the possible damage scenarios. The factors could be the intensity of exposure of any specific damage, may be overpressure, may be a blast wave, may be heat radiation. The second factor could be time or duration of exposure. Ultimately we said risk should lead towards identifying either loss to an individual or loss to the group of people living in the society, which we call individual risk or societal risk. So, ultimately risk should converge to estimate of losses. So, the losses can be loss of human life, loss of asset, loss of public property, etc., whatever may be, but ultimately this is quantifying the loss actually. Okay. So, in that context we discussed about individual risk in the last lecture. We will just wind up back and say the term individual risk is used to calculate risk of fatality, for a personnel under specific conditions. To be very clear, we can say specific locations. During this estimate, it is assumed that the person is always present in the location. So, it is assumed that person is always present in the location and continuously exposed to the damages. Okay, that is an assumption, we already said the list of assumptions. Okay. Sometimes this is called also by a different name, what they call as LSIR, location specific individual risk. So, it is very important to distinguish from person specific individual risk. So, it is very important. So, person specific individual risk will depend on the actual movement of the individual. So, during the process there is always a probability that the person may move out of the risk zone, whereas in location specific individual risk estimates it is assumed that the person is always present in that location and he is continuously exposed to the damage. That is very important. Okay. Therefore, one can say that it is a measure of geographic distribution. So, individual risk is a measure of geographic distribution of risk and is independent of the distribution of people at that location. Or in the surrounding area. Now, the individual risk which is given by IR, that is individual risk of M xy given W, okay, for a location xy for a weather condition W is given by, so IR M xy W is Fm theta 1 to 2 P theta given W P d given W d theta equation 1. So, x and y are actually location parameters, location of the given space. W is the weather combination which can be given based upon wind speed, atmospheric stability given by Pascal's stability class. Fm is the event frequency of the scenario for the chosen failure, damage scenario. Theta is the direction of release, theta 1 impacts the lower value of the location, and theta 2 has the upper value of the location in terms of its impact. So, therefore, x y theta 2 is the upper value of the impact of the location. Okay. Now, x y p given W or p theta given W is the probability of release occurring in the direction PD given W is the probability of death given that release direction. T of course is the contribution to the individual risk. So, this is going to be contribution to the individual risk. At that location for the given weather condition. Now, the total contribution of, let us say, IR MXY, because given W is a specific wind and weather condition, whereas the total contribution is going to be the sum of contributions of IR M XY W for various weather conditions prevailing in that location for a set period. Therefore, I should say IR MXY is the sum of IR MXY W for different scenarios, for different weather conditions. I varies from 1 to n, where you are considering n weather conditions for a specific set period. Therefore, risk results are present in the form of risk contour. Risk contours are nothing but plot which shows the distribution of LSIR. Risk contours are plots which shows the distribution of LSIR location specific individual risk against the background map, against the background of a map. In addition, individual risk per annum is also computed for each worker group. So, in such cases Wi, which is the weather condition, will be considered for the full year. So, IRPA actually reflects the risk of an individual spending certain fraction of time at specific locations. So, if I know IRPA, I will always know what is the risk of an individual spending fraction of time at specific work location. The fraction of time where a particular individual spends a specific location is combined with LSIR at a particular location to derive IRPA. Therefore, IRPA is given by sum of, let us say, all locations of LSIR into, let us say, FL, where FL is the fraction indicating the time during a year, fraction indicating the time spent by the worker during an year at lth location. Okay. So, now after understanding the individual risk, now let us talk about extension of risk management for societal risk. Societal risk is a measure of risk that the events pose to the local population. So, it is nothing but risk posed to the total population or the public in the vicinity this takes into account the distribution of population. So, this should consider the distribution of population over the area, what we call population density. The societal risk is expressed in terms of likelihood of event outcomes that affect for a given number of people in a single incident. So, societal risk is expressed in terms of likelihood of event that outcomes that affect a given number of people, what we call as population density, in a single incident. For example, if the likelihood outcomes that affect 10 people in a given locality, or the likelihood of event may affect 20 people, or it may affect 20 people in the given locality. So, it is amount of understanding what is the extent of population which will be affected by the likelihood of this event if it occurs. Okay, that is the societal risk. So, number of fatalities which is given by n m given O, cost for a given combination of weather condition direction and event outcome. Is given by n x y P d x y given O dx dy. Where n x y is the population density at xy location. PD xy given O is the probability of death from the effect zone whose population density is nxy, which is affected by the outcome. So, here the O is the outcome. Okay. The outcome can be radiation, can be blast wave, can be shock waves, etc. The combination of frequency FMO, the combination of frequencies, because it can occur at different frequency, for the location and outcome and the number of associated fatalities is known as FN pair. Combination frequency FMO and that of fatalities associated which we call as NMO, because that is the fatality associated, is called FN pair. So, frequency for the given values of n can be summed up to get the total societal risk for all outcomes. Rate of death is also commonly known as potential loss of life. Which is indicated as PLL, which is actually a long term average number of fatalities per year for a group of people. So, PLL is long term fatalities per year for a group of people. PLL therefore is the measure of risk for a group of people as a whole, and not as an individual. That is very important. Now, we are talking about a group failure, okay, which is effective in planning risk reduction measures or methods. Because while planning risk reduction methods, people do not look at individual risk data, they will look at PLL. So, generally societal risk, as we just now saw, is represented as Fn pairs of curves, where F indicates the frequency of failure of fatalities and N indicates the number of fatalities under a given condition. So, F is the frequency of outcome and n is the number of fatalities for each outcome. Interestingly, one estimates the risk in terms of societal and individual. SLIR societal specific, geographic specific, or for a group in case of PLL. Then it has got to be implemented for what we call risk management. Kindly pay attention to the flow chart indicating risk assessment and management. Let us say once you have understood the risk analysis methods and you are given identification of hazards, if the risk value judgment is tolerable, then you measure and monitor and keep on checking that the risk analysis tools used are correct and the risk valued by you are tolerable. If the identified hazards are acceptable, then evaluate the results, investigate them for safety. If they are no, then keep on changing the procedure and add in mitigation methods to control risk. So, this part of the problem is what we call risk assessment. Once the risk estimated is non-tolerable, then apply risk reduction techniques to terminate, transfer or treat the risk. Implement the policies, manage them and keep on monitoring them to check back whether the hazard identified now after implementing the risk reduction tools are reducing the risk or not. So, this part is what we call risk management and this part is what we call risk assessment. So, putting together, coupling them together is what we call the overall tool in risk assessment and management in offshore industry. So, ultimately the outcome should be in terms of loss, maybe human life or financial loss or public asset and property. So, one prepares what we call risk assessment matrix. So, kindly pay attention to the image shown on the screen here. In case of risk assessment matrix, there are two basic variables which is being plotted. One is the hazard severity, other is the probability. The hazard severity is classified into 4 stages, 1, 2, 3 and 4. 1 may be called as catastrophic, whereas 4 is negligible. In between they are marginal and critical, whereas the probability is classified into 5 issues that frequently occurring, probably they may occur, occasionally they may occur, remotely they may occur, they never occur at all. So, if you have any incident or event which is frequently occurring, whose probability is also known, which is very occasional but leads to catastrophic hazards, then they are called as red banded values which requires risk reduction immediately. If we have hazard severities in the marginal scale which occur frequently or probably, then you can always waive off those risks under management's control, what we call risk acceptance criteria. So, they are called yellow banded risk. If we have probability which is very remote or non occurring at all, even though they are catastrophic, which are called green banded, then one can safely operate the system and go ahead with the operation with a good high degree of permission. So, risk assessment matrix will try to place the risk of your specific system or set of events in this band, then advise accordingly whether risk reduction is required, is it permissible under operation or is it tolerable under the management's conditions. So, one has got to ultimately narrow down the whole scenario of risk assessment in terms of a matrix which includes the hazard severity and probability. So, friends, we have estimated and understood how to calculate individual and societal risk in a given system. Risk assessment management, how do they actually differ, how are they coupled together to understand better the risk management policies. We have also seen in 3 different modules how reliability and risk assessment can be interestingly coupled. We discussed about various terms on hazard, safety, reliability and risk assessment and management together in this entire course. So, I hope you have enjoyed all the lectures in given modules of 3. All modules are posted with individual tutorials for your self learning purposes. There will also be an exam at the end after completing this course, which is going to be an online exam. You can pass the exam and try to take a certificate online, certified by NPTEL IIT Madras, which can worth of completing this course equivalent to number of credits, which will be useful for you for your career improvement programs. I hope you have enjoyed the lecture. Please give me a feedback in all these in positive modes and try to indicate the parts which are ambiguous, which can be improved upon, which requires further discussion, interactive sessions. I will be available through email for clarifying your doubts. Good luck and bye. Thank you.